Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 190, recording in the wee hours of August 12th, because I've been writing all day at The Athletic about the news that surfaced Tuesday when Kevin O'Connell announced that Kyler Murray, the Vikings quarterback, would be starting the 2026 season. We're going to talk all about that here on the show, the decision, what I thought about the timing of the decision, what I thought about what Kevin O'Connell had to say about the decision, what's next. Lot of thoughts, a lot of perspective, a lot of insights after talking to people throughout the league, throughout the building over the course of obviously Tuesday, but also dating back some months now. So before we get to the questions, which we're also going to do because it's a podcast early in the week, I usually take questions on social media. Just going to riff a little bit on my reaction in real time and in the aftermath to this quarterback announcement being made. First, if you're new here watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. We really appreciate that. You can like the video. If you're listening on Apple, Spotify, or iHeart, follow us there. Give us 5 stars. It helps us out. And we've done this show for like 2 years now, which is absolutely crazy. We're coming up on 200 episodes and really grateful for all of the support, from you guys, because it's why we do it and it makes it fun. So just the little scene setter to start. So I got in my car. I'm headed to the facility. The Vikings had scheduled a Kevin O'Connell press conference for 1:00. I believe around 11:15-ish was around the time that ESPN's Adam Schefter reported that Kyler Murray had been named the starter in conversations with Kevin O'Connell. Shortly thereafter, obviously doing my job, you get the information and you try to discern what the conversations look like internally and what happens in the aftermath. But it just sounds like Kevin O'Connell met with the both quarterbacks Tuesday morning, Kyler Murray and JJ McCarthy, then rolled into a team meeting before a walkthrough. After the walkthrough was when Kevin O'Connell arrived at the podium outside the TCO Performance Center and gave the news, which began with a 7.5-minute opening statement, and then he took questions. The first probably thought that surfaced in my mind was just that, this has been expected from people within the league and many people within the building, from the time that Kyler Murray was signed. And I wrote this at The Athletic for Wednesday, but you just go back to the journey of how we got here. I mean, in January, in his first press conference after the season ended in 2025, Kevin O'Connell said that they definitely wanted competition at quarterback. In March, in the lead up to the combine, the Vikings offensive staff did extensive work evaluating a bunch of the free agent quarterbacks who were available. Leaving the combine, it was pretty clear that the two names most realistic were Kyler Murray and Geno Smith. And then ultimately, it became clear that Kyler Murray was the preferred candidate to bring in. And in doing that, and bringing in somebody who has started as much as Kyler Murray has, who has made 2 Pro Bowls, who, even though Arizona's situation played out the way it did, who still evokes starter in people's minds within the league. It was just pretty cut and dry at that time that the Vikings, that Kyler Murray, in a year where the Vikings were as committed as they've talked about being to short-term winning, to, making the playoffs, to winning playoff games, that he would be the player that they would turn to, barring incredibly drastic development from JJ McCarthy. And I remember I was in Nashville at the SEC basketball tournament with my dad, on a trip I do every year, when the signing first happened. And that night, I believe Kevin O'Connell and Rob Brzezinski did a Zoom call with local reporters, and someone asked Kevin if he was going to name Kyler Murray the starter that night, and he quipped, there was a little bit of a quip of I don't believe we have to make that decision right now. And then from that point forward, the quarterback competition label was kind of placed on it. And, because the ecosystem works the way it does, and because Kyler Murray and JJ McCarthy were are two really high profile, successful college quarterbacks who were first round picks, that obviously became that the competition label became a major and present and vivid conversation on national television shows, on podcasts like ours. I mean, I going back, it's like probably the better phrasing of what it was just like a quarterback evaluation period. And that's why, I mean, I think I did a television hit on Wake Up Barstool last week, and they asked about the quarterback battle, and that just didn't feel like the right description of what I was kind of seeing and watching. Now I will say this: the first question that you guys might be asking or want to know is like, why today? Why did the Viking? Why did Kevin O'Connell really not take this throughout the preseason? Why didn't he take it into joint practices? And Kevin O'Connell was asked that question, and it seemed to be a combination of a couple things. One, just comfort in the experience and the skill level of Kyler Murray. Two, the projection of what they think he can be in their offense with a full assortment of reps. And then three, just the ability to provide the entire team, the entire building clarity as things move forward. And so Kevin O'Connell was pretty open about saying that this time period was one that he had pegged as probably the likelihood or the expected or preconceived time for when this competition would end. But I would say, that obviously raises the questions of like, why not just declare it from the outset and provide that clarity from the beginning? And there are probably a lot of answers to that question. I mean, it definitely keeps JJ McCarthy engaged. I think when you orchestrate the competition the way, the quarterback evaluation periods, I'm going to call it, the way they did, it probably pushes Kyler Murray or keeps him on edge, a guy who, when you talk to people who've been around him, like, it definitely sounds like he thrives with like the motivational undercurrent behind him. And then there's also a world in which, holding the competition and JJ McCarthy showing improvement increase, the idea that it would increase trade value in a way that just handing Kyler Murray the job didn't. And then there's also just the sheer development piece of the more snaps that JJ McCarthy takes with the first team or took with the first team, the more he can kind of acclimate to game speed. I would say regardless, the hard part for me with this and why I've said quarterback evaluation period now 3 times is because while the expectation from a lot of people was what it was months ago, and while Kyler's experience and skill level definitely like stand out and are the reason why I think in the eyes of many people favored him throughout the process. I can't convincingly sit here and tell you that over the course of the 10 practices I saw in training camp, the performances from one were drastically outweighing the other. And so you kind of, have to conceptualize all of that, juxtapose all of it, lay all the puzzle pieces out on the table. And suffice it to say, the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell, because his word on quarterbacks weighs heaviest within the organization and has now for multiple years. The Vikings and Kevin O'Connell obviously decided that this juncture made sense to move forward optimally into the season. And I think I said this already, but and I've said it many times on this podcast, and I've said it in writing. Like there were always two things kind of happening concurrently. There has been this focus and understandable focus on the short term, on this team hasn't won a playoff game since 2019. Kevin O'Connell's entering his 5th season as the Vikings head coach. He hasn't won a playoff game. Justin Jefferson has been with the Vikings. Now this is his 7th season. He hasn't won a playoff game, and he's 27 years old, coming off the frustrating season that last year was. And so there was this focus and fixation on winning right now. And for J.J. McCarthy, who is still a young player whose ceiling is uncertain to everybody, that was J.J. McCarthy's long-term development is more of a long-term play. And the Vikings decided, and they have been open about selecting the short-term route, and whether that produces results in the short term in 2026, like that's the pressure is on that now. And if it doesn't, I do think like the world in which what could the long-term development have ultimately, produced, I think is a question that people here will ask. I mean, I think the two biggest conversations dovetailing off of this news Tuesday to me are, first and foremost, like, so what is the ceiling with Kyler Murray in this offense? How has Kyler melded with the offense? What are the growth area steps for him moving forward? And then simultaneously, like, what have the Vikings done to adapt to Kyler's, preferences and play style, which I'll talk a little bit about. And then I think the next biggest question is just, what does this mean for J.J. McCarthy? How does he take the news? What do the people around him think? And so like that's really where my mind went Tuesday and continues to fixate on. And that's what I've talked to people about, would be those two subjects. I think the first one, I've said this now for months. I've said it on KFAN with Paul Allen. Like, I think if you are an optimist about what's possible for the Minnesota Vikings in 2026, and if you're an optimist about the ceiling with Kyler Murray, the area that I think, warrants the most conversation and discussion is what, Kyler's presence means for the way defenses have to defend the run and the way they have to defend Justin Jefferson. I mean, the Vikings, I'd say already you've seen a lot of shotgun in training camp. I've kept it pretty general with all of the other schematics, but there've been a lot of motions. There's like some new formational type of tendencies that stand out. And I think many of those, pass concepts feel regimented in some ways. And I think a lot of those marry with the preferences and recent history of Kyler Murray succeeding at the NFL level. And so I think that's a positive. And when you add the overhauled run game and the potential that Kyler Murray, who provides a dual threat ability, can force defenses to really have to pay attention to stopping the run and being mindful of the box, that then opens space up for Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison to potentially throw the ball downfield. And that's an area where the Vikings have really not been able to get defenses out of a tendency to play two high safeties and double coverage Justin with a lot of attention. And because they haven't been able to do that, they've really had to rely on very creative ways to get guys open and quarterbacks to play in rhythm and on time. And so I think your margin for error can potentially increase if you run the ball well enough, if you are dynamic enough, to where the opposing defense has to, be mindful of that phase, to where then, they commit more bodies that opens up more space kind of vertically. So I think that's and I would say like the run game throughout this training camp has looked good. I mean, there were multiple plays today where it was big runs popped by Aaron Jones, Jordan Mason, Xavier Scott even. And so like I definitely think for this team to be as good as they want to be in the short term right now, the run game is going to be a critical part of it, and the run game producing and being committed to consistently is going to be integral and essential. And then I'd say for the J.J. McCarthy conversation, J.J. McCarthy didn't talk to reporters on Tuesday. It wasn't like he declined or anything. I just expect him to talk Wednesday. And I think, his words and his reaction is probably going to be most important in this thing. I mean, Kevin O'Connell said Tuesday that J.J. McCarthy is the backup. I asked him that question directly. Kevin O'Connell also said that, he believes J.J. McCarthy is absolutely part of the future of this organization. But for me, I mean, more than anything, it's probably going to come down to Kevin O'Connell has always talked about the importance of the environment in the quarterback room breeding success for the person starting at the position. And I go back to Sam Darnold in 24, a quarterback room that had Nick Mullins and Brett Rippon, and that group was very tight. Like, used to see on Wednesday nights at the facility before Sam Darnold did his press conference. This was every single day, and it will be seared into my mind forever because I haven't seen it before, and I haven't seen it since. But like, it would be 5:30, and it's getting dark outside, deep in the winter in Minnesota, and you've got Josh McCown, the quarterback's coach, Grant Udinski at the time, the assistant quarterback's coach. It would be, I mean, even Daniel Jones was a part of it. Sam Darnold, Daniel Jones, Brett Rippon and Nick Mullins. Those guys would be out there running through every play of the script, all the progression reads, where to look at. And that was, I mean, I think Sam Darnold led a lot of that stuff, which speaks to the professionalism that he displayed when he was here. But, I thought there was a connectivity that you even saw and really heard when you talk to people in the locker room from that group that maximized the position. And so I think, for J.J. McCarthy, in terms of what's next, for the Vikings, ensuring that quarterback room environment is as positive as possible is probably going to be, the number one, box checking piece of this. But I mean, JJ McCarthy, from everything I understand from the beginning of when this training camp and competition began, he's handled himself well. He's been committed to it. And the consistency just in the work habits have absolutely been there. And so I think, it will be interesting to see what the reaction ultimately is. And then, you go down the road of Carson Wentz re-signs here for a reason. Carson Wentz, probably could have had opportunities elsewhere. And so, if it goes down the road of JJ McCarthy is not satisfied with the current circumstance and the people around him prefer that he goes somewhere else, what could you net in return? And would that even be worthwhile considering the amount of instances in recent years where you've needed 3 quarterbacks to play? So like that's really going far down the road. That's a lot of, that's a lot of, probably digging deeper, maybe more than you bargained for, but I don't think there's like and it's usually with everything with some of this stuff. Like, I don't think there's a simple way to kind of look at a lot of it. But I also think like this decision being made does allow these questions of the next phase to kind of arrive. So you guys will probably have, I haven't taken a gander at the questions you guys threw at me on social media. I'll be flying blind on those. But if there's more on the quarterback, I'll obviously get to it and we'll go from there. It'll be fun to get to some of you guys' questions about the non-quarterback stuff, because as I've said in writing in here, there are 88 other players on the Vikings team. I'm very interested in many of them, and to analyze that stuff on a daily basis is going to be pretty fun. Before we continue with those questions, I do want to give a shout out to our presenting sponsor, First Resourc Bank. If you don't know about them, they're a member FDIC bank in the Minneapolis area run by really good people, Tim Siegley, Aaron Siegley, Charlie Anderson. These guys are big-time Vikings fans. They were locked into this news just like everybody else. And the best part of it, they have built a phenomenal bank here in the Twin Cities that is connected with businesses all over the region. They also have a really easy to use online banking platform that is my go-to and has been since I moved up here. So, they've supported us from the beginning, just like you guys have, and they are just like you guys in terms of fans and just members of the community. So can't say enough about First Resourc Bank. The other partner that it's just been awesome to get to work with these guys. But 3 years ago, Kurt Graham and Tanner, 3 guys in the Minneapolis area, they're like, we love football. We want this sport to be as good as it can possibly be at the youth level in Minneapolis and in the Twin Cities and really in the state of Minnesota. So they created Pro M Athletics, Pro M, which is really a platform for middle school kids, high school kids, either who want to play middle school, want to play in high school, want to play in college, a platform for them to really learn, improve, develop, and grow and be around like-minded kids through academies that they have through the winter and the summer. through 7-on-7 leagues like they've had in the summer, through more private quarterback training that Tanner Morgan, who is the former Gophers quarterback, does. So they really just care a ton about improving football here at the youth level in Minnesota. So how could you not get on board with that? I'd say if you have a son, or if you have friends who have kids who love football, are really into it, please send them over to ProMN. All right. With that, let's get to some questions. This will be fun. This will get aggregated, so we might as well just get it right out of the gate. This comes from Ryan Bread at FFRY Bread. He says, no potential J.J. McCarthy trade has been reported to my knowledge, but if a trade were to happen, roughly what would you expect? What would the expected pick compensation be? A fifth question mark? Yeah, I can't imagine there's been any J.J. McCarthy trade reported. Like I said, really want to get to Wednesday afternoon and hear what J.J. McCarthy has to say and cede the floor to him. I think that's the most fair and probably respectful and right way to go about it. I did toss the value question to a couple people throughout the league, and I think, fifth is probably, that's you're starting to get in the right ballpark probably with that. I think you get some different feelings. Trey Lance was traded for a fourth to the Dallas Cowboys. So yeah, I think fifth, sixth is probably the range that feels most realistic with where things are. Let's see here. Adam at Ringo number 4. What's your impression of Ty Felton getting time with the first team this season? Hard to tell how receivers separate themselves at this point in camp. I think that's a really good point, Adam. Some people watch the one-on-one drills between cornerbacks and receivers, and I don't think that drill you're working like your fundamentals and technique off the line of scrimmage and then catch point stuff and route running, but you're not, it's almost like playing one-on-one in basketball as opposed to working within a system of playing 5-on-5 in like a competitive setting. So, it's hard to tell, but I would say Ty Felton, he definitely, and none of this is surprising because I've said before, I think if you were to power rank like the Vikings coaches you trust most with development, Keenan McCardell would be very high up on the list. But, Ty Felton has made a ton of plays. He's caught a ton of passes. The vertical speed definitely stands out. I do think he has some run after the catch ability. And then I think for him, the two most important things are just like the smoothness in the route running and the reliability at the catch point with his hands. And he's been pretty solid in those areas. As far as him running with the first team, some of that is because Jordan Addison missed some practice with the thumb injury. I think some of it is there are sequences where Justin Jefferson isn't, taking the full allotment of snaps because you probably want to keep, him on ice, given how important he is. And then, I also think there are certain packages and sequences where it probably makes more sense to have more of a burner than maybe a Jawan Jennings, who's more of your rugged possession type of receiver. Not that he can't get down the field at the second, third level, but I think that's kind of my feeling and thought on that. So, I've really liked the development from Ty Felton. I'm not surprised by it. Speaking to him a bunch of times over the last, since he got here last year, just seems like a really committed dude. Who's really focused, and it definitely feels like teammates have noticed his progression as well. Next question, Orion Callahan at Maine Meow Mix. Nice. How's the Claiborne-Bredesen combo looking? He got 4 questions here, so we're going to take this one at a time. How's the Claiborne-Bredesen combo looking? I'd say much more Bredesen than Claiborne. Again, some of that is because Damon Claiborne was a little nicked up early in training camp, but I also just think that Max Bredesen, look, the Miami Dolphins last year, when Frank Smith, the current Vikings assistant head coach, was the OC in Miami, they used 21 personnel, which is a fullback and a running back, essentially 25% of snaps offensively. The Vikings last year with CJ Ham were like 7.8%. So I don't know if the number is going to be 25% in 2026. I don't know if it's 15%. I don't know if it's even more than 25%, but the amount of Max Bredesen that I have seen throughout this training camp is notable. And it's not just the amount I've seen him in, but I'm going to keep this general. the positions that they've put him in, where he's lining up, where he's ending up, all of that stuff has been, notable. So much more Bredesen. Claiborne's athleticism and explosiveness really stands out. I think for him, it's more going to continue to be knowledge of the system, protection of the ball, and then just durability. Next question from him. So who is running with the ones at safety? Do we have an idea what the base personnel looks like? It's been a bunch of switch ups, I'd say. At times you've seen Theo Jackson and Josh Metellus as the deep safeties with Byron Murphy kind of as a slot defender. There was a time today where I can remember Chuck Demings mixing in a slot defender. There was a time today where Jamal Adams was a deep safety next to Josh Metellus. So I see that configuration of safeties very up in the air. I don't know how much the preseason will draw out what that will look like come the season, because they tend to be pretty secretive on the defensive side from what their next phase is schematically. Yeah, I think something to continue to monitor. Next question: are we getting a rotation at linebacker, or Wilson and Cashman dominating the reps? I'd say mostly been Wilson and Cashman. Ivan Pace has mixed in for sure, and then Jake Golday, I can remember in my mind a snap today where he's lined up as a stack backer off the ball. Then before the snap, he shifts down on the edge, kind of like Eric Wilson has done previously, kind of like how Zach Bond has done in Philadelphia. So, I mean, I've said this, but the fact that Jake Golday is already capable of doing that at this point in his first training camp speaks volumes of his ability and aptitude to kind of understand what is a complex system. Paul Heggie, what's the backup offensive line look like? How many offensive linemen make the roster? I'd say to be generous, my projection would be 9. The backup offensive line left to right for the most part has been Ryan Vandemark at left tackle, Joe Huber / Henry Bird at left guard, Michael Juergens at center, Joe Huber / Henry Bird at right guard, and then Caleb Tiernan, the rookie, at right tackle. So I think for me, the biggest question is just where do they feel like they are at from a center perspective, depth-wise, and then could Joe Huber edge out Henry Bird, or would Henry Bird make a push considering he's been here a long time in the system? Last question is Jersey Mike's question mark. I had it for dinner, and I'm not even kidding. It was a long day, and it was just absolutely necessary to get Mike's way. You just have to do it sometimes. I haven't talked about it a lot. They still don't sponsor the podcast, but it's really dang good. It just is. So I still go. Next question from Zach Meisel, who covers the Guardians in Cleveland and is one of the best beat writers in all of sports at The Athletic and anywhere in the business, asks, what's the one baseball story you wish you would have had the chance to write? So if you didn't know, I covered the Royals in Kansas City for 3 seasons before moving up here in 2022. Man, that's a good question. The first that came to mind when I thought about this today was I did a ton of work on the Royals trying to do a downtown stadium before I left, and talked to a bunch of sports architects, and I absolutely loved all of that. So that would be one. I'd have to go through the archives of what I've got. I mean, Ash Russell was a first-round pick who flamed out. I always wanted to go spend time with to kind of hear his story. I don't know. I'd say, Zach, you know this about me. Anything that had to do with pitching development, I probably wanted to write about it. But I cannot say that I have missed watching a lot of losses in recent years. Next question. Nick Howard, are you ready to cover a real game and not just practice? Absolutely. But I'll say this, I've enjoyed the 7-on-7, 11-on-11 stuff every day in practice. I'm really looking forward to just watching other guys throughout these practices, watching the one-on-one drills from a pass rusher blocking perspective, getting to focus on other areas of this team that are essential to them accomplishing what they want to accomplish in 2026. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm actually flying to New York this weekend for the preseason game, so we will have comprehensive coverage from that experience afterwards. But yeah, I'm ready for it. There's no doubt. Let's see. Skull Kingdom. How's the punting competition going? If there is one, what do you think of the safety depth? The punting competition, I'd say pretty up in the air. Haven't seen a ton of it, and I definitely have not. I haven't focused on it enough to give you what I would feel is like a comprehensive, fair breakdown. But I think so much of it really, and this could sound silly, is going to come down to like how reliable is either Johnny Hecker or Brett Thorson as a holder for Will Reichard, because if the Vikings are relying on the run game and defense in 2026, then they could be in games where some of those field goals are game changers. And to be in as many games they were last year as a byproduct of that, you have to kick field goals successfully. Vikings forever. How does Kyler's arm talent compare to Sam Darnold's? Really good question. I would say they both have like a natural ability to spin the ball and get it up and down with touch. Like it never felt like with Sam Darnold, he had to try to put sauce on the ball. And like when I say that, is just like, can you turn the nose of the ball over, or is everything on a line? This may be a little crazy, but when I covered baseball, one of the things that you used to hear pitching coaches talk about all the time was like, what is the angle of the pitch coming in from the pitcher's mound? So like some pitchers released the ball from way up high, which created a downhill angle. Some pitchers released it from the side, which created almost like an uphill type angle. And I would say, like with the way that Sam Darnold and Kyler Murray both throw the football, like it feels like they are able to launch the ball up and get it down into certain windows. And that's an area where JJ McCarthy, it was a focus for him this offseason. I think you definitely throughout training camp, there were plays and sequences of plays where you saw him attempting some of that stuff, but the naturalness of it, I think there is a separator there. But I'd say the arm talent is one thing to compare, but I mentioned Sam Darnold's professionalism earlier, and I think that's the thing, with Kyler Murray from this point forward is like, is everybody going, you hear it all the time when you talk to, like former players, elite players. I had a conversation 2 weeks ago with an elite former player who was like, there are times where that person at that position, you just absolutely will fight everything for. And I think it's going to be incumbent upon Kyler Murray, like establishing that he's worthy of being that guy kind of inside the locker room. Travis Ingwerson, how much pressure do you think is now on Kevin O'Connell with having another experienced passer in the system if the Vikings don't make the postseason and win a playoff game? I mean, look, when you're an NFL head coach, there's always pressure because of the expectations every single year. But I've said this for months now. Kevin O'Connell is in a situation where coming off the 2025 season, where Sam Darnold obviously moved on to Seattle, and then Daniel Jones chose Indianapolis, and the team ultimately went down the path of signing Sam Howell and then transitioning to Carson Wentz. I mean, Kevin O'Connell has an opportunity with Kyler Murray, I think, for, to prove that he can help develop, improve, resurrect, or best position another veteran quarterback. And if it does not go well, then I think it will, the second guessing will become part and parcel of just what, how it works within the league. So I think there's always pressure on NFL head coaches. It's a very, you got to do it right now type of job. Like there's a lot of baseball analogies, but when I cover Major League Baseball, like the pitching coach, they could hold their job for 5 years with not a lot of success. And like, there's just not this attentiveness to it. Whereas in the NFL, when you're a head coach, I mean, it's a week to week rise and fall kind of thing. Rock NHL, how relieved are you that abuse from 9 fans will end? Look, like I've said this before, I'll clarify it again. For me, the reason that I talked about Kyler Murray the way I did throughout this process was because of what I said at the very beginning of this podcast, was just the expectation that people within the league and some within the Vikings building had of how this was going to go. And so until, I say this on the podcast before, I feel like I've learned a lot about quarterback play. I love studying it. I'm really curious about it all. But I'm never going to pretend to be like, Mr. Mechanics, because I never played the position at any level, much less an important level. And I'm very readily open to admitting that. So I take my cues from the conversations that I have with people I trust. So that's what I'd say about that. Let's see. How have TJ Hockenson, Juwan Jennings looked? Have not heard much of either, really, just given all the quarterback stuff. Yeah, I mean, TJ Hockenson, I can't say throughout training camp that he's been a focal point with where a lot of these passes are going. I mean, you'll see, flat route throws here and there, some quick game stuff kind of near the numbers here and there, but not a lot of over the middle, deep attempts to TJ Hockenson. So it's something I'll definitely continue to watch. And then Juwan Jennings, I feel like in the run game, he's definitely been physical, similar to, TJ Hockenson. I don't know if it's always been the vertical downfield stuff, but then I say that and I go back to a practice last week where he did have one of those catches. So I think Juwan Jennings' ability will probably show up most when the pads are legitimately on come the season. Roy McAvoy felt like what the beat reporters were saying out of practices and what the spectators were saying differed. What's your take on that? I think a lot of fans felt misled. So, yeah, I'll say there was a day this past weekend where I couldn't attend practice, and just I observed it on social media. And, I mean, I can understand and empathize really with just the level of, you're on the For You page, you're seeing videos, you're seeing opinions. You don't know, what the dynamic is of the person providing that opinions. And I've already said on this show that I don't think there was a perceivable drastic difference one way or another with how these guys look through 10 practices. And I think that's why in the end, the decision that the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell made on Tuesday just speaks to their conviction in Kyler's experience, and in the projection of what's possible in their minds in this offense. And if it goes really well in 2026, I think they'll be rewarded for it. And if it doesn't, I think it will obviously lend itself to second guessing. Let's see here. Let's do one more and then we will hop out. Billy at Quicksand 311. What's your guess on the amount of playing time each quarterback will get during the preseason? I think that's a good question. I'll speak for this upcoming weekend more than anything. Like, I would be pretty surprised if Kyler and the first team played more than one or two drives. I think, you then probably segue to J.D. McCarthy, who plays a quarter or two, and it's probably pretty good opportunity for development in real time, even if defenses in the preseason don't show a ton. And then, Carson Wentz, Max Brosmer can kind of get their feet wet a little bit as well with some of those third teams. But that's kind of how I see it for this first game, and then probably, we'll adapt from there. But yeah, that will do it for episode 190 of the Alec Lewis Show. Before we hop out of here, I do want to mention two of our other sponsors. First, at Aquarius Home Services, your independent, authorized Connecticut dealer. They know that managing a household and all of the expenses that come with it is no easy task. They also know how important having worry-free water in your home is. Your family deserves water you can trust. Use it every day for drinking, cooking, cleaning, and bathing. That's why they are excited to share their summer trade-in and trade-up program. Trade in your old water softener and trade up to a Connecticut whole home water treatment system. The best part, you can get an additional $500 off on top of their summer sale prices. Say goodbye to hard water, rust stains, and unwanted contaminants, and hello to cleaner, worry-free water flowing through every faucet all day, every day. Please check out the stores, The Athletic. that I wrote on Tuesday and Wednesday on the quarterback situation, some nuggets in there. And then much more to come on the quarterbacks and everything else. Like I said, we'll have a story on players to watch leading into this preseason game. We'll be in New York for it. Looking forward to being at old MetLife Stadium. And then we'll be back next week with comprehensive coverage of it. So looking forward to it. Any other questions I didn't get to, throw them in the comments section or toss them on social media at me at Alec_Lewis at Alec Lewis Show. That'll do it for episode 190, and we will talk to you very, very soon.